to catch her breath. You'll just see. You'll have to make a lot of contributions, but you can have the floor when you're ready.
Okay. President, honourable members, Commissioner, strengthening preparedness and crisis management at EU level is a political priority for the European Union. Our leaders have rapidly underlined the importance of a comprehensive and coordinated approach and called for further actions in this area. The new Preparedness Union strategy by the Commission and the High Representative in March this year must be seen in this context. Europe needs to move from a reactive approach to a preparedness by design approach, one that anticipates, prevents, and effectively responds to a wide range of crises. The extreme weather events, the COVID-19 pandemic, Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and hybrid attacks underscore the risk and threats the EU faces and will continue to face. And as further challenges are expected to become more frequent, complex, and interconnected, we need to move to an approach that enhances resilience across the EU. Effective preparedness demands engagement at every level of society. It is primarily a national competence, but there is certainly room for more collective action at the EU level. The Danish presidency considers preparedness, resilience, and crisis management a priority. A number of the policy actions announced in the Union strategy will be presented by the Commission during our presidency, and we will examine them carefully in the Council. In particular, we will focus on the legislative proposal on a revision of the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, which we expect shortly. We will work towards a negotiating mandate with a review to the negotiation with the European Parliament. The Union Civil Protection Mechanism is certainly an EU success story. It coordinates the delivery of support from member states or from EU capabilities, such as rescEU, to a member state that is overwhelmed. Since the beginning, the mechanism has helped so many communities, including those hit by forest fires. That is why the revision of the mechanism needs to build on this success and to make sure that it continues to deliver the successful cooperation it does today. As we consider these policy initiatives, we must recognize that immediate and decisive action is critical, given the worsening of the extreme weather events as recognized in the Union strategy. In recent days, we again have seen the devastating impacts of climate change, with many areas of Europe suffering the effects of extreme heat. Once again, this summer we are expecting large wildfires and long drought in various parts of our continent. These events are becoming more and more frequent and more extreme, and they pose an unprecedented threat to our populations, to our economies, and to our ecosystems. As the continent experiences the fastest rate of heating globally, Europe must get better prepared, and quickly. Mitigation and adaptation measures to counter climate change are crucial. As presidency, we work for a secure Europe and a competitive and green Europe. That is one of the reasons why the green transition is essential for a secure and competitive Europe and to counter the effects of climate change. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. And now, on behalf of the Commission, Commissioner Labib. Thank you. Go ahead.
Honourable members, today our European continent faces record heat, prolonged droughts, and devastating wildfires. In just the past 10 days, thousands of hectares have burned in France, in Greece, Germany, Spain, Albania, Serbia, and Turkey. We are witnessing the destruction of ecosystems that will take years, even decades, to recover. And our citizens are feeling the impact of this extreme weather in their home, their health, and their livelihoods. These are not distant warnings. They are the direct consequence of climate change, and they are sending us a very clear message. In the latest Eurobiometer on climate change, nearly 4 out of 10 Europeans say they feel personally exposed to environmental and climate risks. And over 8 out of 10 believe that better preparation for climate impacts would improve their daily life. So we need to listen to them. Honourable members, we cannot look the other way. The heat wave many of us experienced just 10 days ago is a stark reminder. The climate is changing right before our eyes. Droughts and wildfires are closely connected. Dry conditions make fires more likely and far more dangerous as well. All signs point to a difficult wildfire season this year. Many regions are already facing severe drought. Wildfire activity has been above average since the start of this year. And this summer, extreme heat is forecast across most of Europe and beyond. My thoughts today are with the citizens who fear for their lives, who have lost their properties due to the devastating wildfires around Narbonne and in Marseille. And of course, I would like to express my gratitude and my admiration for the rescuers who risk their lives fighting these fires. But now, the EU is better prepared. This year again, the European Union stands ready to support member states, and any country that requests our help, our teams are on standby 24/7. While national authorities led on wildfire response, we are working side by side with them every step of the way. And the EU can step in even before wildfires start. We are using science and technology to monitor droughts and detect fires at a very early stage. This includes the use of drones and AI to detect and respond to fires. Our systems send real-time alerts across Europe. Our Copernicus satellite system provides free, high-resolution maps of fire-affected areas and their surroundings, and member states are using it. Just recently, Greece requests Copernicus imagery to monitor wildfires on Chios Island, and earlier this month in Crete. In past years, we have seen moments when member states simply could not help each other because they were all facing high wildfire risks at the same time. In 2017, Europe experienced its worst wildfire season in history. More than 130 lives lost and around 1 million hectares burned. That was a turning point. The EU responded by strengthening the Union civil protection mechanism and creating rescEU, a strategic reserve of firefighting planes and helicopters, to ensure that no member state is ever left alone to face devastating wildfires. Honourable members, this summer we have 22 firefighting planes and 4 helicopters ready to respond. They are stationed in 10 countries, strategically prepositioned to cover the highest risk areas. That's how 2 Greek Canadair were deployed, for instance, to Albania within hours 3 days ago. In May, I visited the Torrejon Air Base in Spain, which hosts several Spanish and rescEU Canadairs. I was deeply impressed by the professionalism and the dedication of the air crews, working under extremely tough conditions, both in the air and also at the sea. And it's not just in the skies. On the ground, 25 fighting teams from across Europe are ready to step in wherever they are needed. Between July and September, we have also strategically prepositioned around 650 firefighters from 14 countries in wildfires-prone areas, including Greece, Portugal, Spain, and France over the summer. We started this prepositioning as a pilot in 2022 with 236 firefighters from 6 countries. We are now 650 from 14 countries, developed in 4 countries. So next week, I will visit, for instance, Czech team stationed in Greece this summer. Their presence on the ground means faster response times. It also creates opportunities for learning and cooperation between teams from across Europe to build trust among them. EU firefighters are already on the ground, battling the flames side by side thanks to the EU civil protection mechanism. In Greece, Bulgarian firefighters have joined Greek teams in Halkidiki. As we speak, Romanian firefighters are standing shoulder to shoulder with their French colleagues to fight the wildfires close to Narbonne and Marseille. This is Europe in action. This is solidarity in action. At the same time, we are bringing together Europe's top wildfire experts at the ERCC to help forecast risks, support planning, and monitor the situation in real time. Of course, the best way to fight wildfires and to manage prolonged drought is to stay ahead of them, to anticipate and to prevent them from spiraling out of control. We also need to speed up our efforts to address the root causes of wildfires. Climate change, of course, drought, forest degradation, and biodiversity loss. All of this make wildfires more frequent, more intense, and also harder to stop. Prevention is already a core part of our common agriculture policy, and next year we will present an ambitious EU climate adaptation plan. As highlighted in the recent report from the European Court of Auditors, more and more member states are turning to EU funds to invest in prevention, and that's a step in the right direction. Between 2021 and 2027, 18.8 billion euros are planned for investment in climate adaptation and risk management under cohesion policy. This includes 3.3 billion euros dedicated to forestry alone. Honourable members, this is exactly the kind of proactive, comprehensive and joined-up approach that the Preparedness Union strategy calls for. It is how we build resilience before disaster strikes. But let's be clear, preparedness needs resources. We need bold, sustained investment in prevention and preparedness. And of course, I do not forget recovery. Recovery is essential, not just to rebuild, but to give hope and support to those affected by disaster. The EU Solidarity Fund is a vital tool to make sure that when crisis strikes, no country is left to face it alone. That is why I count on your support to uphold a strong level of ambition in the upcoming FFF negotiation. This is not about political bargaining, it is about solidarity, the very soul of our European Union. Thank you.
Grazie, Commissario.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now in the debate, I call Ms. Dupont on behalf of the EPP Group.
Thanks, Madam Chair, Madam Commissioner, Madam Minister. The Union Civil Protection Mechanism is a European success story. Since its creation, numerous emergency responses had been carried out. Equipment for firefighters, first responders had been financed and delivered. Firefighters are pre-positioned throughout Europe to help faster than before. This is, like you just said, Madam Commissioner, European solidarity on the ground. As we speak, 22 firefighting planes and 4 helicopters stand ready to support in the current wildfire season. 650 firefighters from 14 countries are pre-positioned in high-risk areas. More ground firefighting teams are ready to be mobilized. And that solidarity is needed. If you compare this year's wildfire season to the previous, threats and dangers are multiplying. Colleagues from Portugal, from Spain, from Greece, from France will soon tell us about the devastating effects on the ground. As the threats are emerging, man-made and natural ones, we also need to adapt as well. We need to be better prepared for larger incidents, for simultaneous and escalating incidents, and that means we need to scale up. The pool of experts and the deployments, the investments in equipment and material, in resilience and readiness, the common risk assessment, the forecast and the situational picture. And, Madam Commissioner, we need to scale down on administrative hurdles, a common task for all of us here. In the end, it is our task to support those on the ground who are bravely fighting wildfires today and floods tomorrow. We owe it to them. May they all return safe and sound from their deployments. Thanks.
Prego, onorevole De Caro.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. De Caro, on behalf of the S&D Group.
Grazie. Prendo...
Thank you very much indeed. I am speaking on this subject following on from my maiden speech in this House on drought a year ago. And basically, since then, the situation has deteriorated considerably. We have seen soaring temperatures across Europe, in Spain, in Portugal, and over 40 degrees in Italy, as well as in France. And we have had 5,000 meters being the altitude at which we have temperatures over 0 degrees in the Alps. And between 2015 and 2024, we had a proliferation of wildfires. We had 196,000 hectares destroyed, which was 70 more than the previous year. But there's a common denominator here, and that is the word emergency. We're already lagging behind when it comes to our structural programs, and we have to change our programs, intervene immediately in order to prepare our territories for this phenomenon and make sure that we invest resources properly and make sure that we're more efficient in our next budget. There is no alternative for Europe if it wishes to save itself. First of all, let's realise what's going on and then act. Thank you very much indeed. I now call Mr. Bay, who's not here, but so I call Mr. Bellato, therefore, on behalf of the ECR Group.
Signora Presidente.
Madam President, Madam Commissioner, the community and national institutions have to face up to the ramifications of climate change because we are seeing a proliferation of wildfires. But the fact of the matter is that in 96% of cases, fires are attributable to human intervention, either accidental or deliberate. And I think that shows us that we cannot confine ourselves to showering public resources on measures to mitigate climate change. But there's a better case for investing in prevention and awareness raising amongst our citizenry. When it comes to wildfires, well, these occur because people carelessly discard a cigarette butt or because they fail to properly deal with fires, or because of people recklessly starting fires. So what can we do in those cases? Well, all we can do is intervene promptly when those kinds of situations occur. But we should also be investing in raising awareness and educating people and trying to ram home to them the consequences of their actions on other people. So extremely costly as well in terms of the economic damage, and devastating from an environmental point of view, particularly when it comes to the substantial losses to biodiversity. But we cannot confine ourselves to preventive measures. We also have to try and anticipate these events and be there to intervene immediately to save people's lives as well as to safeguard the environment. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the women and men who are there fighting fires as members of civil protection forces, and they offer to us their professionalism and their courage and often put their lives on the line to do a valuable, indispensable service for the wider community. My most sincere gratitude to all of them, and thank you for listening. Thank you very much indeed. And now, Mr. Alioni.
President, Commissioner, Minister, Europe is on fire, temperatures over 40 degrees, in particular in the south of Europe, forest fires in March in the Netherlands, devastating our countryside here and now. I spare a thought for my comrades active on the front line, for those that have lost their belongings. I worked as a firefighter for over 30 years, fought on the front line. Here I am fighting a different scourge as an MEP, the scourge of climate skeptics. We must all stand firm against climate skeptics. The science is unequivocal and it is crystal clear day in, day out. We must anticipate and prepare. That is the whole point of the EU Preparedness Union strategy. How can we do so without sufficient resources? We must bolster funds for the EU Civil Protection Mechanism. 58 times last year, funds were called down from that mechanism. Prevention is always cheaper than cure. So how can we prepare without sufficient resources? As you said, we have a number of firefighting planes deployed on the ground. But today, here and now, I call on the Commission and the Danish presidency of the Council to acquire European firefighting planes made in Europe for Europe. We have those skills here in Europe. Beyond the operational urgency, this is a matter of sovereignty and strategic autonomy. If we are to be properly prepared, we must protect the commitment shown by our citizens. There are over 80% of firefighters who work on a voluntary basis. I call on the Commissioner to recognise their efforts. This is very important to many MEPs. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I now call Ms. Scuderi on behalf of the Greens.
Mentre spendiamo miliardi.
We are spending millions on weapons, and we're losing the battle against climate change, and we've got temperatures soaring to 50 degrees, and we're seeing flooding and fires. Yet Europe continues to count its dead. We have a number of elderly and disadvantaged people. We have got workers and children who are collapsing to the ground. We had 159 hectares who were burned to the ground in Italy, all a result of drought. Is this the kind of world we want to see? We have to face up to this emergency, put an end to it. It is a structural problem, and we have to be prepared for it and make sure that we invest in prevention as well as in structures. We need greener cities. We need to defend workers. We need renewable energy. We need to move away from fossil fuels. We have any Shell, X, Maloney, Trump, Musk and all their friends. And the EPP voted against the climate emergency legislation, allying with the far right and basically undermining our ambitions. And they've already announced that is what they are set to do in future. But what will they do if there is no water? What are they going to do? Are they going to just defend the arms lobbies?
Grazie onorevole. Prego onorevole Palmisano.
Thank you very much indeed. Ms. Palmisano.
Grazie Presidente.
Thank you very much indeed, President, colleagues. The climate crisis means that the wildfire season is far longer and more devastating, and in Italy, over 60,000 hectares of land went up in flames, and at risk also are human lives and also vast swathes of land. People have lost their lives while they were trying to put out these fires, and we can't leave these people to their own resources. We need to do more. We need to be more prevention, more European cooperation. We have to do everything we can support volunteers and all those who risk their lives to save all of us. Now, we have a European civil protection mechanism. It has been scaled back, but if we, as Italians, in the face of these wildfires, need to look at who Europe is protecting exactly, Europe must change course and it must beef up the civil protection mechanism. It has to make the right choices and recognise the value of defending our territory. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole.
Thank you very much indeed. I now call Mr. De La Hoz Quintano.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, the wildfire season has unfortunately started already in Tarragona and near Marseille. This is a threat and a tragedy in human, financial and environmental terms, a threat that grows from year to year. The European Union has bolstered funding for efforts to fight wildfires, but our efficiency has been less than satisfactory. We need more coordination and we need more of a focus on prevention. Competence for managing forests lies with member states, but the European Union can improve coordination to ensure that our efforts are more effective. Very often the efforts are financed by the European Union, and we need better coordination of long-term prevention and planning. We need genuine investment to improve local capabilities, to improve their firefighting capacity. That is extremely important. We need active management of the different scrublands around Europe. We need to fight effectively against wildfires. We also need to ensure a more dynamic rural area. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole.
Thank you very much. I now call Ms. Temido.
Obrigada, Presidente, Senhora Comissária, Senhora Ministra.
President, Commissioner, Minister, this year in the European Union, the temperatures, wildfires are far higher than the average. In Portugal, my country, we've had an increase, considerable increase in fires, even just at the beginning of summer. And it's becoming more and more frequent. And it's one of the reasons why we really need to be prepared at European Union, because there are no borders here. Strategies in the EU are part of this context, and it's a good, cohesive strategy, consistent, and will lead to more staff, more firefighters, and better coordination. But this is not reflected in your decisions, because I think the regulation to set up a framework for monitoring European forests, which is under discussion here, this is a position, a common position of the Council, which, although the Commission was positive in its output initially, this has been distorted. If we don't have reliable data that we can compare on the European forests, we won't be able to have proper protective policies that will be efficient. How can we be so inconsistent?
Thank you very much, Mr. Domator.
In Europe, we are seeing more frequent droughts, more devastating effects. There is a fund for compensation, some 440 million, but that is insufficient for the entire EU. There is a further problem. There are calls to dismantle that fund in the next MFF. We know that there are also calls to step up debt for Ukraine. That is unacceptable that we do not have the funds for Europe. It is equally unacceptable that energy and irrigation for farmers is becoming ever more expensive. The Hungarian government guarantees free access to water for farmers during drought periods. However, this measure was attacked by the Commission, said that some sort of payment was required and a price structure. So who is looking after farmers in times of drought? We heard from other MEPs talking about this. We would like Peter to be here present to give an explanation as to why he voted in favour of measures that would take water away from farmers in Hungary.
For you, if you want. Please, Ms. Boss.
Comment on, now we're talking about how we vote. So when you, within your group, will sit with the file on the 2040 targets, are you going to proactively work towards something that will really make a change in the future so that we will prevent further climate change? Thank you.
Let me answer in Hungarian. Nagyon fontosnak tartom a klímaváltozás elleni küzdelmet.
It is very important that we take action against climate change. It is important that when the Parliament and the EU take decisions, they are not taken in such a way that companies and families bear the burden. We've seen in recent years that this Parliament has placed a huge burden on companies and families. And the Parliament has interfered with what is going on elsewhere in the world and is not worried about the competitiveness of Hungarian farmers, families and companies. That is not the right approach. When you suggest such proposals and decisions, you need to recognise the economic consequences.
Thank you very much. And now Mr. Solier.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam President and Commissioner. These wildfires don't start with the flames, but rather when the land is emptied and when people forget about cultivating the land, farmers throw in the towel. Basically, we have expelled those who looked after the land, all kinds of ridiculous norms, because if you have herds then there is life, and our farmers basically are firefighters without uniforms doing a job of work for us all free of charge, but they are not compensated by the CAP. They are punished more than supported. We have got people working with their hands. They care for the land, and if we don't care for the land, then we are doomed.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Gebrandi.
Madam Commissioner, obviously full support for your policy of preparedness union. And it's obvious, like other colleagues have said, that we have to work closely together to work on these droughts and forest fires. And if you imagine that even in April in a country like the Netherlands, we already had forest fires, it says something. But let's face it, the best way to deal with these crises is to prevent them. And it's climate change that causes droughts, forest fires and floods. And it's threatening our livelihoods, our food security and even our lives. So, colleagues, let's invest in climate mitigation, in the 90% emission reduction in 2040 and in a sustainable agricultural system. Today we voted and we made 280 million euros available to assist several member states with the effects of floods of the last couple of months. And I hope that those parties who are voting against any climate change action, I hope that they have very, very deep pockets. Because in a few years' time, we don't need 280 80 million euros, but we will need billions of euros. In 10, 15 years' time, we will need tens of billions and euros, and I count on you to pay that check. Thank you.
Grazie onorevole, prego.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marta Ibanez.
Grazie, Presidente. Signora Commissaria.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, in my country this summer, we've seen two historic developments. In June, it was record highs, 4 degrees higher than what we expect around these dates. We are also currently seeing parks closed for the first time over the summer. The temperatures are too high. This is a result of climate change, of course, but also the fact that we have nationalists in our governments. This is happening in my country and in other countries. We need action. We need to improve emergency funds to tackle climate change. We need better coordination on the European rescue mechanism. But the Commission also needs to be brave. It should not be entering into deals with those that deny climate change. I appreciate the fact that funds were made available to deal with the aftermath of floods in my country. I appreciate that, but we are seeing devastating events at the moment. We need more resources. We need better coordination between the emergency services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would remind all of you should stick to your allotted speaking time, and I'll call Ms. Kuntura.
Thank you, Madam President. Greece, my country, as well as other countries in the south of Europe and the Mediterranean, once again this year are suffering the dreadful consequences of the climate crisis. Heat waves are threatening human lives. Wildfires once again are consuming huge expanses of forests, farmland, destroying homes and livelihoods, leaving injuries behind them in their wake. And unfortunately, many member states are not able to cope efficiently with these extreme weather conditions. The EU needs to take immediately more measures for prevention and for managing the situation. The European Civil Protection Mechanism and the European Solidarity Fund, unfortunately, are not sufficient. What we need is a strong and effective European Civil Protection Mechanism, which will be properly shored up by the multi-annual financial framework so as to provide adequate and timely support to those member states affected, to allow immediate investments in critical infrastructure and modern technological equipment, and finally, to ensure that we have staffing and human resources at the level of prevention as well as the emergency response.
Anadiotis. Thank you very much, and I now call Mr. Anadiotis.
Thank you, Madam. We are hit every year in Greece by these wildfires. Animals, people's lives, farmland are destroyed, forests. We're talking about hectares and hectares of land. Almost 1.5 stremas in the whole of the country last year. And we are still suffering the consequences of this. It was one of the worst years in the whole history of this with regard to wildfires. In Evros, we had the biggest wildfire since 2000 in the EU, when we started through the proper Copernicus system measuring and calculating the impacts. It's all about prevention and response, but what we need is to give priority to the rescEU mechanism, and we need staffing, we need human resources and proper supervision and monitoring. We are losing the whole of Europe. We're all losing out. The rescEU will have to be put into implementation. It has to be the future to save our forests.
Thank you very much, and I call Mr. Tonin.
Komisarka. Madam Commissioner, dear colleagues, I come from Slovenia, which in the past has been the victim of fierce forest fires and nature fires. More than half of our country is covered by forests. Fires in difficult accessible areas are a constant threat. I myself am also a voluntary fireman. Slovenia, with 2 million inhabitants, has 156,000 voluntary firemen, of which more than 50,000 operational firemen. I'm saying this why? Because I want to emphasize that in order to have efficient and effective firefighting, we need a sufficient number of firefighters and equipment. And especially volunteer firefighters are crucial for increasing our preparedness against disasters, man-made or natural. They are the first ones to respond. They're the ones who know their local area. I stand convinced that a true preparedness union cannot exist without a clear recognition of this human capital. The EU should financially support volunteer firefighters and immediately do away with all the unnecessary bureaucracy that disables volunteer work. People who make themselves available in this way need the right equipment. In the past years, Slovenia has enhanced its air component for firefighting, and it is the air component of firefighting that can crucially contribute to putting out fires in inaccessible areas. That is why I expect the European Union to increase available equipment that countries can share. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Parin.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam President. In recent days, there has been a heat wave throughout Europe from north to south, posing a threat to all our regions, not only in the south and not only in the Mediterranean. We've seen fires in Greece, Germany, France, and in Scotland, and we are now contending with the consequences in Tarragona. The repercussions of climate change pose a threat to our health, our economies, and our lives. And that is why, very painfully, we have to learn from what happened in Valencia, what happened in Texas, and we have therefore to intervene in a timely fashion and make good use of public resources and human resources in facing up to the consequences of climate change. Commissioner, we need to have a European strategy with the necessary wherewithal resources. That is certainly something we would support, and we therefore call on our governments and people as well as science to put in place systems and make sure that they are properly coordinated. This really is a golden opportunity for us. We've got the MFF coming up. Let's see if we can rise to the challenge, and we will hopefully act in time in order to save lives. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Leonardelli.
Thank you, President. Every summer, the south of Europe, the south of France, catches fire. We see the effects of climate change in my home region. Within a week, some 4,000 hectares were destroyed by fire, despite the heroic efforts of our firefighters. Same tragedy in Marseille. What is the French government doing? It is taking note, it is promising, but it is not taking action. We know that the resources are woefully inadequate. We didn't have sufficient resources last year. Our fleet of planes is insufficient. Macron's promises ring empty. Only 2 additional firefighting planes. We heard about promises for firefighting helicopters, none purchased, they're being leased at exorbitant costs. We see water management servicing the environmental dogma rather than what is pragmatic. Thank you.
There are cards for you. Yes.
Monsieur Leonardelli, bien entendu, on se connaît.
Now, we know one another. There are some issues we agree upon. Now, today My fight is against wildfires. We talked this morning about decarbonising Europe. For 36 years, I worked as a firefighter. I saw how virulent and potent fires were, and I have been fighting for a number of years against climate sceptics. So when I hear what you have to say and I see about the need to support firefighters in Europe, work to ensure that we have a better climate, that we don't see devastating impacts for our civil protection forces and our citizens. They are paying a heavy price. Please.
Monsieur Allon, effectivement,
Mr. Alioni, I'm familiar with your fight, your support for firefighters. I know that you yourself worked as a firefighter with an exemplary record, but I know that you are here in this chamber as a representative of Emmanuel Macron. We have an ageing stock of firefighting equipment and vehicles. Our firefighters are on the front line. They need better resources. They need hefty investment. And you have not managed to guarantee that investment for a number of years. Face up to your responsibilities. Together with Marine Le Pen, we will deliver those promises for our firefighters.
There is an... Oui. Il y a un autre. Monsieur Pelli... Francese, ok. Monsieur Pellerin-Carlin, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur Leonardelli.
Mr. Leonardelli, members of the European Parliament represent our voters, and when you are talking to people who have served their homeland as a firefighter, like our colleague, Mr. Allion, you're not just talking to anybody. You're not just talking to a head of state. You're talking to someone who has really served his country. I'm sorry. That's the way things work. I'm sorry, just listen. I don't know if you're very familiar with the term democracy, but what I want to say is, what did you vote this afternoon when we were voting at the emergency procedure for the climate? Can you just tell me, just remind me what you voted?
Nous ne rentrerons jamais dans vos délires.
We're never going to get bogged down in your ridiculous, delirious aspirations, and we will, unlike you, will be on the ground fighting fires, and we will be the first defenders of the firefighters.
There's another blue card, but we're going to proceed with the debate, and I call Mr. Razza. Thank you very much indeed, President, Commissioner. Ever since this Parliament started, we've been talking about fires and drought. And as a member from Italy, I have a number of questions for the Commission. In fact, I have already quizzed them on the choices that have been made, particularly when it comes to the procurement of Canadair. We have the impression that we are lagging way behind. And we also have the impression that the choice has been made for a technology, maybe the only one available, but it is nevertheless obsolete in the face of the growing dangers. And we need to invest in digital technologies, new forms of technologies to save our citizens. Now, we have already said that many of the fires are linked to structural factors, but the fact of the matter is that much of the devastation linked to the fact that they are discovered very late in the day. We don't manage to respond in a timely fashion. So that is why we need to factor that into our preparedness strategy and pay greater attention to European partnerships to try and surpass or surmount obsolete technologies.
For you. Prego, onorevole Gerbrandi.
Mr. Gerbrandi.
Yes, thank you so much, Madam Chair. Mr. Razza, I listened carefully to you, and we all agree that we... Yes, Mr. Razza, I listened carefully to you, and I think we all agree that we have to fight forest fires. But something else is that we have the responsibility to avoid a further increase in forest fires. And one of the most important reasons of this increase is climate change. Whether you like it or not, it is there, and it's causing the enormous increase in forest fires. What are you doing? You're a powerful man because you're a member of European Parliament. You decide on climate policy. What do you do to help avoiding further forest fires in Europe and the rest of the world?
Non penso che il Parlamento europeo, collega, abbia la...
Well, it's not here in the European Parliament that we can avoid future fires. It's only national politicians and governments who can decide on the proper strategies to combat these climate-linked phenomena. Now, of course, I'm from Italy, and we obviously will work directly on those plans, and we will work directly on prevention. We'll look at hydrological prevention, so water resources, basically all of the different measures that we need in this day and age to try and ward off these kinds of emergencies. We will now move on with Mr. Vasile. I cannot see him in the room, therefore call Mr. Stankis.
Grazie, Presidente. Colleagues, crises are the part of Europe, but when the disaster strikes, it's not governmental official who knocks first at your door, it's your neighbor, and that is where true preparedness begins, in trust between people, in the strength of local NGOs and community groups who knows the names and needs in their neighborhoods. They can organize trainings, build resilience from the bottom up, and often they are more trusted than government institutions. We see this in Finland, where networks like Vapeppa link citizens and state, and across Europe, like in Latvia, where Latvian Platform of Development Cooperation works to build local resilience. We must support the human infrastructure with recognition, with resources, and with a seat at the table, because resilience starts with the person next door, not the system above. So let's include strong support for NGOs in the EU preparedness strategy as well. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nicolau Alavanos.
Evia, Chios,
Evia, Chios, Attica, Crete. These are just some of the thousands and thousands of hectares that have burnt in both Greece and Europe. The strategy, which is implemented by Greek governments as well, consider that prevention and manning and staffing of firefighters something that is costly. It's this is the reason why we have so many shortcomings. It's not just about prevention. It's all about prevention. We have to look at the shortcomings, stop just patching things up. And that's why we start talking about individual responsibility, climate change and climate crisis and so on, and the weather. People have to save the people in these cases on the basis of proper prevention with full-time staffing, with more support, more financial support, and a proper firefighting fleet.
Onorevole Pedro.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Pedro.
Se há risco que no meu país, Portugal, conhecemos.
If there is one danger we're all too familiar with in Portugal, it is wildfires. Since 2020, over 160,000 hectares have been destroyed by fire, and people have lost all. It is time to move from reaction to preventive action. We need a new structure. We need prevention. In Portugal and in the south of Europe, prevention and defence must start in the forests. We need to anticipate these disasters. In 2024, many firefighters in Portugal were deployed. Firefighting planes were deployed to put out fires. This is an issue of importance for integrity. Territorial integrity action must be taken before a fire breaks out. We need to manage our forests. We need rescEU. We need more airplanes for those on the front line, Portugal, Spain, Greece. We cannot kick the can down the road. We need action. We need to draw down from the Cohesion Fund the farm policies. We need prevention rather than firefighting afterwards. We need resilience and education to show that resilience is part and parcel of education. Thank you.
No. Thank you. Go ahead. Monsieur Pellerin-Carlin.
Mr. Pellerin-Carlin.
Marseille brûle.
Marseille is on fire, and the far right is averting its gaze. I, therefore, have in my thoughts the firefighters in Marseille continuing to battle the flames. I also think of the people of Marseille, my friends, Elise, Leah, Christophe, Pascalie. And I feel deep anger because for 30 years now, scientists have been warning us about the danger of climate deregulation disorder intensifying forest fires. I mean, it's not just a TikTok video that will save Marseille from the flames. Rather, it is the courage of the firefighters and indeed our courage as politicians to tackle the root cause of this scourge, namely climate change. Just today, the majority on the right and the far right of this parliament have rejected our demand for an urgent European law on the climate. Colleagues, we must act before it is too late. We must act before we end up in a world in which the courage of firefighters is no longer enough to save Marseille from the flames.
Prego, onorevole Vasconcelos.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vasconcelos. Ms. Van.
Muito obrigada, Sra. Presidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Commissioner, honourable members. Portugal is very familiar with the situation of not being prepared. In 2022, over 100,000 hectares were burned. That's more than twice the average for the previous year. We lost about 30% or more of our land. And as compared with other countries that do not have to deal with drought and dry conditions, we are seeing more and more extreme conditions, floods, therefore, as a result, year after year. It's not something that is unexpected. It's simply something, that is linked to the climate change. We've got all sorts of rescue and response strategies elaborated by the various quarters, but we need to take a look at things like water waste. Countries like Portugal just don't even have a proper land register. So how can you possibly manage forests in this manner? It should be the priority in order to prevent fires. So obviously there's some economic game being played. We do need to prevent rather than cure, and therefore we must put a stop to this lack of efficiency.
Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada. Há países que prohíben industrias nocivas, como Portugal, que impõe uma...
Thank you. In Portugal, there is a moratorium on planting eucalyptus trees. There are countries where various moratorium on eucalyptus plants are in place. That is the case in Galicia. In my home region, we are not tackling the root causes of wildfires. Land is owned by companies that want eucalyptus trees to be planted in Galicia because it is not allowed in Portugal. We are seeing the cellulose companies and paper manufacturing companies forcing this through. 160,000 additional hectares are being set aside for eucalyptus production. what we are seeing effectively is destroying biodiversity. We are not nurturing indigenous plants. This is all being done for the paper manufacturing industry. I recommend an Oliver Lesch film on what burns.
Prego, onorevole Magyar.
Thank you, Mr. Magyar.
Köszönöm a szót, elnök asszony, biztos asszony. A gyönyörű hazámat az
Thank you very much indeed, Madam President and Commissioner. Now, in my wonderful homeland, we are once again confronted with an extensive drought. Now, drought, of course, is a natural disaster, but it is the responsibility of the Orbán government that Hungary in recent years has not properly invested in the water industry, and we haven't maintained the old infrastructure, and we haven't looked after our water industry, hence the difficulties that we are now experiencing. The government instead has been gifting our money to the oligarchs. My party is going to make sure that we don't take water away from the farmers, make sure that local farmers do get their due. Now, there are express instructions from Orbán, and there is no break on that. But when we take over government, we will make sure that we change course. We will move away from the intensive of farming, and we will take all the development measures that Orbán has failed to take.
Vicepreședinte, doamna comisar, dragi colegi, Uniunea Europeană.
Thank you, Commissioner, colleagues. We really do have to focus on prevention. These extreme temperatures are becoming more and more frequent in various sites and hotspots. And the farmers have seen their land drying out, villages were caught fire, and the figures are absolutely astounding. We need more resources at local level for these vulnerable communities. We need a proper response, an anticipatory response from Europe. But we can't just abandon people. If we're going to be prepared, we're going to have to not just intervene, but we have to focus on prevention as an essential part of our budget.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Saric.
In today's world, it is key that we become more resilient as a society to any threats to our population, and this includes the readiness for natural disasters. The EU strategy on preparedness to crisis also speaks about this, which means that the Commissioner is very much aware of the issue. As a former defense minister, I was also competent for this area, and I'm very much aware that it's very important to include firefighters, civil protection, and the society at large. It is very important that the armed forces are not only concerned with combats, but that they can also be used for these purposes. This is why we need dual-use items which can bring about difference between life and death. But without true prevention, we can see no success. We need to adopt a broader perspective as to how a society and as an economy we can be more responsive and more sustainable. Respect for nature should become our first line of defense. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tsiodras.
Madam President, Commissioner, 2024 was the hottest year in history. Wildfires and drought are the new reality. And the figures speak for themselves. 380,000 hectares were burnt last year in Europe. And we're talking about 44% of agricultural land. We're talking about a huge cost. In my country, Greece, but most of the Mediterranean are seeing more and more of this. We're not just, we're talking about climate crises which have no borders. We need to focus on investments in prevention. We need preparedness, not just fine words. We need it in reality. We need to work at national level, regional level, local level, but we need better cooperation with the local authorities and citizens' protection. We need modern methods, modern technology. We need the Solidarity Fund. We need a platform for emergency warning. We need proper focusing on water, supplies of water, not wasting water. We need to protect our ecosystems. We have to, in Europe, move to action. We need more ambitious action right now.
Thank you very much. I now call Ms. Eriksson.
Tack för ordet.
Thank you. This Parliament is unfortunately full of climate deniers, and yet we can see the crisis emerging before our very eyes. I can think of examples from Sweden. You may think that everything is wonderful in Sweden. It often is, but we are seeing increasing droughts, ever higher temperatures. We are also seeing increasing deforestation in Sweden in recent years. When I was a child, we didn't see any insects in our forests. We are seeing increasing heat waves and droughts throughout Europe. We are seeing the consequences of climate change. The effects are demonstrable. We hear, however, those who deny climate change, and yet they come begging for funds to deal with the consequences of climate change.
Thank you very much, Ms. Princi. Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Wildfires and drought have become dramatic. Europe has to deal with these. In Calabria, for example, we've had 150,000 hectares of our green heritage destroyed. We're well aware of the challenge. And in Calabria, we have developed a positive, proactive model for Italy, one which might be replicated across Europe. We've got zero tolerance. That is the policy of Roberto Cuto, who is the president of our region. And we've had some astonishing results. We have managed to use 20 drones to carry out continuous monitoring of the at-risk areas, as well as a strategy which has reduced by 57% requests for intervention by the national fleet. Calabria is showing that if Europe can engage in prevention, it will spend less and it will also preserve its very valuable wooded heritage. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Anatoliou.
Kyrie Epitrope.
Commissioner, every summer we have, the same inadequacy with the wildfires. We've got so much burnt land already in Europe, and we're only not even halfway through the summer. The Commission is talking about preparedness and the union of preparedness. But what does that mean when we don't have enough funding, not even for basic things? The Greek government, instead of preventing fires, it focuses on some kind of information and communication without the proper figures that are required, without proper guidance. So, of course, it's always the wind that is to blame when the fires start. We need immediately to put funds into focusing on prevention. We need a permanent mechanism for emergency response with the proper staff, firefighters and so on need to be in position before a fire breaks out. We have to focus on provision and resilience to drought and fires. Of course, if we don't change things now, Europe in the future will burn before the summer starts, not even then, before the spring starts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now call Mr. Buda.
Thank you. Honourable members, in recent weeks in Romania, hundreds of hectares in farmland have been destroyed by fire. In Marseille, firefighters are still battling with the flames. This is the case throughout Europe. This is a crisis, climate change. It is a fact, a reality. Infrastructure, plants, homes are under threat. This is a threat across the European Union. We cannot abandon member states to go it alone. We need coordination. We need a preparedness union. We need investment in water infrastructure, reservoirs, irrigation systems, water received. We need to strengthen the civil protection mechanism, more volunteer firefighters. We cannot waste any more time. If we don't have enough water, we won't have enough food, and a lack of food would threaten the security of each and every European.
Frau Vizepräsidentin, Frau Kommissarin, Frau Ministerin, Waldbrände.
Ladies and gentlemen, forest fires are often due to the volumes of water, and these kind of phenomena are ever more frequent and ever more devastating, and that is something that I'm well aware of with my earlier office as a mayor in my home region in Austria. This is not a fleeting situation, and that is why a systemic European response is necessary. We need a strategy for a prepared union, and that is a significant step in the right direction. We need to have a civil protection unit, and it has to act in solidarity, early warning systems, cross-border coordination, and shared reserve capacities with investments in protection infrastructure. We need to have voluntary organizations to intervene as well. And if we do not invest in a sustainable fashion, then coming generations are going to pay an ever higher price. And in order to be able to act, we need a strong budget. That is what we need in our MFF. We can't revert back to thinking in terms of national budget.
Glavak.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'll call Ms. Glavak.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. We're talking about joint European response when it comes to ever more frequent climate incidents of fire. Wildfires are certainly one of such important incidents. Europe has lost 500,000 hectares of forest last year. The rescue fleet had 28 planes and 4 helicopters last year. It will play an important role to help member states. I come from Croatia. Unfortunately, Croatia has been facing an ever greater number of wildfires, so I strongly support this. Last year, we signed a contract to buy 2 new Canadair planes from this mechanism, which should be delivered in 2027-2028. We have shown a great operational readiness facing different threats, so we can share our experiences. We have also invested 634 million euros into firefighting efforts and additional 55 million to buy additional equipment. But the Union of Preparedness must be more flexible. It must have a targeted support which is adjusted to local needs. In conclusion, we need prevention and operational plans, rational investments in security and safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Serrano Sierra.
Thank you. 2024 was the hottest year, beating all European records. We've seen historic droughts, extreme heat. At the same time, we saw the worst floods since 2013. Natural disasters, they are no longer freak events, and there is a clear cause: climate change. We are seeing ever worse effects of climate change. We need to mitigate the impact of climate change on Europe. That must be a priority. Our different regions need resources. The next budget, the European Climate Action Plan, needs sufficient resources. We must stand firm against climate deniers. That is a priority. We know that prevention can save lives. We in the Socialists will always stand up to those that deny what is needed. We will stand firmly shoulder to shoulder with our different regions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call Mr. Umberto.
Cara Presidente, cara Comissária, caros colegas.
President, Commissioner, honourable members. As a representative of a community in Portugal, I can say from my experience that you're better safe than sorry. Prevention is better than cure. There are so many periods of drought and wildfires, and we need to be prepared. We need prevention. The Commission has fleshed out this program for civil protection with more firefighting aircraft and helicopters and so on. More than 500 million euros have been put into prevention and protection this year, and that is the correct way to go. We need a European Union that is prepared, that is resilient, that is cooperating, and where all collective efforts will be put into practice for a safer Europe.
Thank you very much. I'll call Mr. Hadjipato.
Colleagues, preparation in the European Union for drought and wildfires are being debated while Cyprus and other countries are dealing with dreadful disasters and droughts, wildfires. What we need is early preparation and the correct cooperation with the proper authorities in order to deal with the situation. We recognise the importance of the civil protection mechanism of the European Union, which makes a considerable contribution towards an immediate response. But unfortunately, that isn't enough to be successful and efficient in dealing with this. We need to ensure that the budget of the European Union, including the new MFF, will provide considerably more funding for prevention and preparedness. And we must also ensure that we have access to water for all citizens, especially in those countries with a lack of rain, as is the case in Cyprus. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you very much indeed. That concludes the debate. We have 8 requests for Catch the Eye, and we can take them all. Mr. Miamon, for 1 minute. Thank you very much indeed, Madam. Forest fires require a coordinated response at European level, and I think preparedness, therefore, is an important component of that. But prevention is not enough. We need to be able to respond effectively in extinguishing the fires. And in Spain, we have sufficient expertise in this. But the development funds should be there to invest, not just in prevention. Now, the Commissioner has explained that the European Union will have a permanent fleet, will expand that fleet. It will invest in firefighting planes and helicopters. Now, I'm from Galicia, and we have had a lot of fake news circulated by a member from Galicia talking about the collapse of the bipartisan government 20 years ago as being responsible for forest fires. This isn't just an EPP matter for Galicia. Rather, we have an integrated centre for firefighting in Orense, and we are consolidating this with international standards for joint training programs. And this year we've had firefighting planes from Estonia as well as from the Netherlands. Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Andrakaitis.
Thank you, dear colleagues, dear Commissioner. Of course, wildfire has no longer affected only southern Europe, but also erupted in northern and central regions of European Union. And wildfire are no longer seasonal phenomena. They are persistent, systemic threat, and they require a systemic response. And over 150 experts from the EU proposed an integrated wildfire risk management strategy. One of the strategy's central ambitions is to help shift EU from fragmented reactive response toward a shared proactive framework to support long-term resilience and civil protection capacity. In a context where climate change is reshaping geography and intents of fire risk, this shift is both urgent and complex. I think we need to include it into our preparedness union plans.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you very much. And now call Ms. Ferenc.
In Hungarian. Tisztelt elnök asszony, tisztelt biztos asszony. A nyár Európa egyes
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. We've seen this summer all over the place, very high temperatures. Many regions, including Hungary, are really suffering from drought. We're doing it as much as we can to help. We won't leave our farmers alone in this. Last year, we had a third worst situation. 160 million were put into improving the situation, but we really need a prepared EU, prepared for this type of disaster, and sovereignty of member states must also be taken into account and respected, and the European Union must be in a position to be able to provide coordinated assistance, because we need to be faster, we need less bureaucracy, we need to work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tinkinen.
Grazie. Arvoisa puhemies, Euroopan tulee olla varautunut moniin uhkiin.
Madam President, Europe needs to be prepared to many different threats. There is a great threat at the east, the southern border is about to collapse under migration pressure, and our internal security is also under threat. Our crisis resilience will be hanging by a thread unless we invest in it sufficiently. But who is to invest is another question. In addition to paying for our own defense in Finland, we are also paying for fighting against forest fires and floods elsewhere in Europe. A country that is well prepared also needs to take care of those countries that have not prepared as well. Do not worry, I will always say yes to preparedness. However, preparing together for the bigger threats does not mean that we should prepare together for every single threat. The EU needs to be a community of prepared states, not a transnational fire brigade or a cash dispenser.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lully.
Commissioner Labib, the people of Ireland will not forget what you did for them when Storm Éowyn hit our shores last January. Your emergency response mechanism sent 18 industrial generators to Ireland. The light came back, the water came back. Our government will hopefully learn to trigger that mechanism earlier. Fortunately, we do not have widespread wildfires in Ireland, but the small coastal community of Achill in County Mayo certainly has an issue. In the last 3 years, they've had 12 wildfires, 3 of them so far this year, and indeed their village was evacuated last year. They want to speak to you and to the Commission about a new policy, a strategy to deal with the situation, a national farm and land management strategy. They say their lives, their homes and their farming livelihoods and even the designated conservation areas are under threat. So they want joined-up thinking, Commissioner. They want the Commission and the Irish Government to work together with all the agencies. They do not want to pass the buck. Somebody saying it is not my job to put up the signs to speak to the tourists. It is not my job to speak to the farmers. We ask for a joined-up approach. Support the people of Achill in County Mayo. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Prego.
Thank you very much. Ms. Riba.
While we are talking here, my country is burning. People are dealing with the devastating effects of flames and fires. Some 15 million hectares destroyed through 3 fires in recent months. Almost impossible to get a grip on. Lives lost. We have seen more and more drought, record highs and duration. June was the hottest ever this year. In the Mediterranean, we've seen tropical temperatures. Do you know what the greatest risk is, though? The climate denialism on the right of this House. If we allow the far right to draft climate laws, as the EPP seems likely to do, we will not see progress. We cannot allow the far right to win through with climate denialism. We need a Europe of science. We need to fight against climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haria.
We're talking about a union of preparedness. What are you talking about? What preparedness? When the European Union is actually funding the disaster. Dinero is a program which has been implemented in Europe and is in violation of directives of the European Union, destroying Natura sites and forests as well, amounting to felling of these forests, basically. It's actually facilitating these wildfires. Here we go again. I sent a written letter to the Commission and they told me they knew nothing about this project, which is being funded with euros from the Recovery Fund. We'll have a look, they said, when it comes to check what is going on in audit. Meanwhile, we're talking about all sorts of organizations and bodies in Europe, in Greece, which have been complaining officially to the European Union about these violations from a specific project called Dinero. When you're going to do something about it, if you really want to be prepared, stop funding the fires that are deliberately being set to destroy nature. We need to talk about proper prevention and staffing and firefighters.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jovanovic.
Mulțumesc. Da, vă mulțumesc că ați menționat România și pompierii români, pentru că
Thank you very much. Romanian firefighters are assisting in European operations and have done every year in all countries. The problem is that they are paid 500 to 600 euro per month. Now, they may be firefighters, but they might also be paramedics. They might work for the Special Intervention Service. It's been killing them. They don't get any help at all. And the voluntary firefighters are not paid. They don't have the necessary equipment. They don't have the essential technology. But, you know, the money is there. I've listened to Mr. Negrescu and Mr. Buda. They represent the socialists, and they have been running Romania for 35 years now. And they complain, in fact, that Romania doesn't have the equipment. Well, it's their fault. It's down to them. Because basically firefighters have been let down by the government, and then we're pointing the finger at them, accusing them for not defending people. Well, you know, in actual fact, they have saved them. The problem is the nefarious activities of the socialists. I mean, that is the fact of the matter. That is the truth of the situation in Romania. Thank you very much indeed. We have concluded the debate. I now call the Commissioner.
Honourable members, thank you very much for this vivid, fruitful debate, for sharing your thoughts, your experience and your insights. I will start by saying that the Commission's approach to preparing for wildfire and drought season goes far beyond simply reacting to disasters. We are focused on building long-term resilience through prevention, risk management, preparedness and clear communication. And you are right, Honourable Member Lena Dupont, when you say that we need to scale up our approach to preparedness. That's exactly, in fact, what we are doing by preparedness by design. When we say preparedness by design, it's about without, introducing any administrative burden, not only by strengthening the EU civil protection mechanism that we will call UCPM 2.0, but also by mainstreaming preparedness in many other instruments. With the EU Preparedness Union strategy, we have therefore committed to embed preparedness into all relevant Commission policies. And we are getting everyone on board. We will step up our efforts to raise public awareness about wildfire risks and strengthen cooperation with the private sector. And when it comes to the question of the choice of the Canadair for the purchase of 12 rescEU planes, the European Commission engaged in several discussions with potential manufacturers, and ultimately the decision which was taken by the national authorities of the member states was based on technical, operational and economic factors. And at the time, the CL515 from the Havilland, Canada, was the only specialized medium amphibious firefighting aircraft available on the market. Unfortunately, no comparable European alternatives existed then due to the relatively small market for this type of plane. And that said, we remain hopeful that European manufacturers will play a more significant role in this market in the future. We already discussed this issue with Commissioner and Vice President Stéphane Séjourné. And Honourable Member Grégory Allione, merci tout d'abord pour votre...
First of all, thank you for being so committed, and let me reassure you. We are committed to citizens, and it's one of the recommendations in the Ninisto report, which underlines that we don't take into account sufficiently the strength of solidarity in each individual citizen. These are the first, they're in the forefront of our strategy, and without them, nothing is possible. We need, of course, volunteers. We need to encourage a new, trained generation ready to face these dangers and to take action. But at the same time, we need to be courageous enough to take on and shoulder our responsibilities in view of these natural disasters with a proper plan to adapt to climate change, which will very soon be presented by our Commissioner Wustra.
Report of the Parliament has already made significant progress in strengthening wildfire preparedness in recent years. That work gives us a solid foundation to build on. We do not take this challenge lightly, especially as climate change accelerates and environmental degradation deepens. This is what European solidarity looks like in practice, working together to build a common, collective preparedness for wildfires. Et je terminerai encore.
And finally, one last thought for all those who are fighting in the front line, fighting the fires all together, in this intense wildfires not far from here, sometimes going beyond the borders of language, culture, and national borders just to save lives. It's the European Union that we love. It's the European Union of solidarity in action. Thank you.
Grazie, Commissario. Prego, Ministro.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now I'll call the Minister. Thank you. Go ahead.
President, honourable members, Commissioner, thank you for inviting me to this debate on such an important topic. Also for our presidency, I noted your stories and comments about fires, floods, extreme heat, and that illustrates the scale of the challenges. And it also points to the need to work for high climate ambitions. And in this regard, I want to emphasize that the Danish presidency, that the 2040 climate target is a priority for the Danish presidency. The Preparedness Union strategy also emphasizes the societal dimension of preparedness. Some member states and the EU institutions have already developed interesting actions which we can build upon. Engaging with our citizens on preparedness requires better communication and exchanges with them about the risks that they are facing, including those posed by extreme weather, such as wildfires and droughts, and what they can do to prepare themselves. The European Parliament is in a good position to participate fully in the communication with citizens about the challenges of preparedness. The Council therefore counts on you for this common effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Minister. And with this, the debate on this item is closed. Now, I would like to inform you that the ECR Group has notified the President of a decision relating to changes to appointment within delegations. This decision will be sent out in the minutes of today's sitting and take effect on the date of this announcement. A ďalším bodom programu je...
Another point is the Commission presentation of a strategy for creation of stock, strengthening capacities for action in the view of the changing risks and threats. Commissioner Leiden has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President.